everyone. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. So, if you're watching on YouTube, if you could please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, or if you're listening on Spotify, you can always follow us there. Every like and share and subscribe can help our channel to be seen by many more Stargate fans. So, we really appreciate it. And then we also have all of our socials listed up on the screen right now if you wish to follow us there. Okay, thank you, and I hope you enjoy. Bye. And to all the Stargate fans out there, we would love to hear from you and chat with you on our show. So if you're interested in doing that, please reach out to us via any of our social media platforms or email.
Today, we're going to talk about two episodes we recently saw, especially because one is such a pivotal kind of moment. At least it seems. Maybe we'll have to see how the rest of the season develops, but for once, we're both on the same exact episode. We've just watched episode 14, The Prodigal. Prodigal.
Yeah.
And we're actually going to talk about the episode leading into that, which I believe is called Inquisition, and also then The Prodigal. And before we begin, please, anybody out there who has art, who has fandom merch, who just wants to get on and talk about why they love Stargate so much, you're more than welcome to contact us, and we'd be happy to hear from you and experience your creativity and your engagement with the fandom. But yeah, so I guess we thought before we would dive into the episode 14, which had such an impact on the plot, that we both experienced something we haven't experienced in a while. And I thought it was funny because when you wrote me about it, it was almost the exact same experience, because I watched it with like also my kids and and of course Martin, but like the kids said they'd never seen this also. And I remember one of them saying something like, but didn't we, like, are they really still doing this? And it's that it was like a clip episode, and sort of a refresher where you would get the kind of background from other previous like seasons. And I think this is maybe the first time they've done this in Atlantis, correct?
Yes, it must be, because it's the only time I noticed it. Yeah, because I know that, like, sorry, I know you'll I don't know if you have other things to say first, but yeah, I definitely noticed that it was like a recap episode because I hate recap episodes.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an important topic to discuss because, of course, even going back to SG-1, like Stargate had a lot of these. And I think we can look at, for example, in season 1, they had the one at the end, and then they've had some at pivotal moments where right before a very important episode, they had a recap. And I think in the original SG-1, it made a lot of sense because especially early on, there might be people that join at the end. There isn't really TiVo at this point. I mean, maybe there was, but like
Yeah.
for sure in 1997, it wasn't quite like everybody had it or access to this kind of thing. So it was reasonable that you could have just missed everything. And, you know, you tune in, you hear about Stargate, and you show up for like the end, or maybe you don't remember because it was literally 6 months ago when you watched the first episode. So I kind of do understand it in the earlier seasons. I also think that in SG-1, they did have some really creative clip episodes. I think Citizen Joe is maybe one of the more interesting ones in terms of it not necessarily just feeling like a clip episode.
What do you call it? A clip episode?
Or clip episode, a flashback. I mean, I don't know, maybe
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sure there's a term for it, but like there's episodes that kind of show clips of other.
Was that all that one? Was it like, yeah, because in my mind I call it a recap episode, but that's
Yeah,
basically the
that
same thing, right?
recap
Like,
is probably makes more sense.
so Citizen Joe, that one was yeah, it's been a while since I've seen that, but I did like that one. So I guess maybe that's the one that I liked out of all recap episodes, if that one was like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what was interesting about the Citizen Joe as a recap episode is that you like right now you almost didn't remember that it was that. And I
Yeah.
think when you're watching it, you don't get the like at least I mean, you only maybe notice because you see, oh, excerpts written by and the main titles. But as you're watching it, you don't get this feeling like this was made for the purpose of being a recap episode. I mean, it is later in the series and it kind of does function as that, but there's this other aspect to it. So I kind of like I really that one it just somehow didn't have the same kind of feeling of, oh no, it's recap. Like there was
Yeah.
actually something more to it. This particular one in Atlantis, I mean, maybe we can talk about that, how it was integrated, because I feel like it was actually just set up very in a way of it being a recap because they were kind of like on trial and then it repeats what they did. And so, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of, and I can't remember what episode this was in SG1, but I remember there was a recap episode in SG1 where they were all at this important meeting of some sort with, I think, the president and everyone. And um, like the Stargate command was being questioned if their like organization should be there. And they had this whole like thing of recapping everything that happened as a way. So in that sense, it was almost like a trial. So then this one was a trial. And it just, yeah, like at first I thought it was a regular episode. I did not expect it to be a recap. I thought they were going on a new mission. I thought they were meeting a new community of people, or I guess what are they called, a coalition. And then as soon as it started diving into like Shepard like defending himself and explaining what had happened, and it would do like clips of showing those like past moments, all of a sudden I was like, no, this cannot be. This cannot be the cursed recap episode, because they've never had this in Atlantis, and I was happy I had forgotten these types of episodes existed. And oh, I just hate it so much. Like, I understand the purpose for it, but I feel like, I mean, during the time of Atlantis, like that was, what was that?
I think this was
Early
2008
2000s.
already.
Yeah. Um, like I don't know if at that point people were into like the binge watching kind of thing. I'm not really sure. Because I feel like once people had the ability to start binge watching things, I think that's why maybe we feel so strongly about not liking, or at least why I feel so, can't speak for you, but why I feel so strongly about not liking those types of episodes is because I'm typically binge watching, or if I'm not watching, it hasn't been that long since I watched it, and then I go and I watch another episode. Like, I prefer having a thing maybe before the episode starts, that if you need to remember things that they say previously on, and like they'll do like maybe a minute or
Mm-hmm.
two of like, this is what happened at these times, but it's not part of the episode. I'm fine with that. Like if I need to refresh my memory, cool, have that. That's awesome. But to have it in the whole episode, even though they do try and do it in a creative way where it's supposed to not feel like it's just throwing out all the facts of things that happened, like I really hate it. I find it very, very boring, and I just like my focus just goes away. And I can understand why they did it, because of the next episode they had brought up a very specific character in the recap. um but I just don't like it. Like, how do you feel about it? Are you I know like you don't necessarily like it, but are you in agreement of like the things I said, or do you feel slightly differently?
Yeah, I mean, I probably would be very similar in the sense. I think in 2008, there wasn't necessarily binge watching, but I think a lot of people had TiVo or other
Mhm.
like means like DVR recordings. I know this was a thing in the early 2000s already. And
Okay.
I can't remember like because I didn't have, I mean, my actual first Netflix, I got even CDs and the discs in the mail.
Oh
So
yeah. Oh
I
my God, I forgot Netflix did that. Yeah.
Yes. And then there were like some things you could stream, but not everything. And so I remember this kind of like transition.
Yeah.
I know that also on like, for example, some like networks like HBO or something, because of the way that the cable worked, you could basically sometimes you could watch all the episodes one after the other.
Mm.
And for sure this existed in 2008 or 9 because I remember being able to like save episodes and then watch them like
Oh, okay.
over and over on like a DVR. I think it's what it was called at the time, like DVR,
Okay.
or like some people had the one called TiVo. It probably depended what you had. Maybe one is
Yeah.
earlier, one is later. I can't quite remember, but I do remember things like this where then you could go, oh, okay, I will record all the ones in that series, and then you can sit down and watch it. So I think to that extent, the ability for somebody to for example, at this point in the series, to go back and watch previous episodes or see things is much higher than in 1997.
Yeah.
When, like, I mean, not only were things not even syndicated, where it would necessarily be showing on cable, but like there were no DVDs being sold of the series. I mean, at the point where like season one, it took a while for, I mean, I remember in the past, like you would have to wait sometimes a year for a DVD set to come out, or longer, of
Yeah.
a TV show. So it wasn't
Yeah.
so normal that you could like rewatch it right away. And but I think in this case, what was so jarring is that already you feel the shift of the change in television.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like you already are a little bit more perceptibly aware. You're further along in the like
Yeah.
almost to 2010 here. And so it is a bit, I think in that sense for me, it's a little bit more jarring because it's so much more unexpected.
Yes. Yeah.
Like I wasn't excited for the clip episodes in SG1. Like it's not like I was like, oh yay, the recap episode. But it was like it didn't jar me quite so much. I think with this particular situation, I did find it very jarring. And it was more like, oh wow. And I think even like, Freya turned and said, oh, recap, really? Like, and I mean, it kind of clicked to me very quickly because I saw in the beginning all the different excerpts written by, and I was like, oh no, is this going to be a recap?
Yeah.
Uh, but I mean, and the reaction we had is that we actually just had to watch already this next episode, because like you feel a little bit like you didn't get the episode, because
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
and, I mean, I can understand, like, again, I can really understand in 1997 that you have this situation where you need to kind of get everybody up to speed so that people that maybe just joined aren't totally lost when
Yeah.
they but at the same time it is like, yeah, in Atlantis we didn't have any, so it was very like, and then in season 5, like of all things, like as the show, it's like psychologically it's about to end,
Exactly.
and you're like,
Yeah.
what is going on?
And so late into the season too.
Yes,
So it's
exactly.
just like it didn't make sense to me. I mean, I think if there was a benefit of it, the one benefit or a few benefits I would say would be that it does kind of put Woolsey in a slightly new light, because like um I feel like maybe the intention of that episode was to kind of show him that he can step up. Like
Yeah.
he knows like the right thing to do, even though he's been leading Atlantis. Like I feel like sometimes he has a tendency to think the wrong thing, if that makes sense, like think the
Mm-hmm.
opposite of what could work, and then people have to prove to him that the opposite actually works by things happening. And so I feel like in this he kind of stands up and he goes there and he speaks for them at the trial, um and uses the skills that he has with that to kind of get them off the hook, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. And so I think that maybe kind of showed him in a new light a little bit, or more of that leadership sense, I suppose. And then it does remind you that Michael was
Mm-hmm.
never actually seen dead, which I always just thought he was dead. So then
Mm-hmm.
going to the next episode, I was kind of surprised. Like, I mean, not fully surprised because of the recap episode where
Mm-hmm.
they mention Michael and how do you know if he's dead, kind of thing, and they say, well,
Yes.
the ship blew up, blah, blah, blah. Um, I hadn't remembered at least seeing anything where they make it like he's escaped. So like I just assumed he was dead. So I was surprised that he came back.
Yeah.
And then the next episode.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I mean, I guess there were like, I mean, just like with the one thing I have to say about all the Stargate clip episodes or recap episodes, like outside of the the recaps, there's usually something really important to the plot. So you actually can't just skip them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think that's kind of like, I mean, yeah, it's like, oh, okay, I have to watch these recaps, but there is usually something very pivotal to the plot there.
I think that's why it can make it difficult because like it's like enough information that it feels like a useless episode, but then there's that little tiny percentage of the episode that you're like, okay, but I need to hear this part. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have to
exactly.
stick around to know how things occur, what happens, to make sense of it as we continue. And so it's like, yeah, it's actually really interesting because it's something that never occurred to me until we started doing this podcast and talking about it, on all of the different changes that happened throughout the years in television. Like, I find it really fascinating. Like, if you
Yeah,
truly start to think about how things shift and change and progress and all the different changes that happen, and then I think about all the people that work in the different positions in television, and how that must affect their job role up to a point, and just or affect, like, it's like now, for example, like you get a series, it's going to be 9, 10 episodes for the whole series typically, as opposed to 23, 24, because
hmm,
it's usually on a streaming service like Netflix or something, as opposed to actual television, where like they just worked the actors like to the bone, and like they never got to sleep and had to do a million episodes. So it's just really like interesting in that sense, almost like the history of television and how it's kind of changed, but then how, as viewers watching it now in 2025, how we notice that too. And
yeah,
how I kind of wonder, like, it'd be an interesting thing to ask your kids, because they're younger viewers that only have a viewpoint of what's been there since they've been around. And I wonder, like, if certain things are just really difficult for them to watch because it just fits a different format that they're not used to seeing. I mean, I do remember Freya telling us that one time when she was on, that she initially liked that Stargate was a slower pace, like with
hmm,
SG1. So that is probably a difference that like she noticed. But yeah, it's interesting to kind of see how all those things change.
yeah. Well, what's amazing when you think about it, the amount of time we're talking about, okay, is 1997 to 2008. It's 11 years, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And if you go forward, I know in 2010, 11, people were already binging stuff. So in
Mm-hmm.
this very span of like 14 years, you went from where people were watching things where they really had to wait every week, to where people had opportunities to maybe record something that they missed so that they could watch it later, to where they could collect things and watch multiple things later, to where they could just watch it all in one shebang in a very, very short time period.
Yeah.
But then if you look from now to 2010, actually nothing really changed other than there's more streaming services and it's more pop. Like, I think that the biggest probably change in terms of how people consume it is that you have to have multiple accounts. And so that's kind of
Oh,
like overall in terms of the
yeah.
actual paradigm, because it used to, there was like this golden age of streaming and binge watching where everything was just on Netflix or something.
Yeah.
And then it,
Everything was Netflix with, and then like you says, you initially had like the discs you could, like, that you could get through Netflix. And then even like outside of that, I don't know if you remember Redbox. Remember
yeah,
Redbox?
exactly,
Like,
yeah.
where like it was like usually put outside, like almost like a vending machine style thing where you
Mm-hmm.
could rent a movie and then bring it back,
Yep.
kind of thing.
And it was super cheap. And yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting, right? Because somehow it's so much evolution in like that actual short time, but in the same time, like, it's like really the same paradigm of
Yeah.
interaction with how people interact with shows. And I mean, other than that, basically the market got saturated and now it's kind of splintered off. And so I think like the golden age of like the best age of streaming, like what people probably consider is when everything was much more centralized and you only needed the one account. Um,
Yeah.
and now it's like, and then I think there were always rights issues, and so then things would be in one service and not another, or they would be on for a little period and not, and so I think it got much more complicated. um
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's
I mean,
interesting, right? Yeah, like,
yeah. I mean, there was a show I was interested in watching that was on Netflix like years ago, and I went to it, and they literally only had season 4 of that show. And
yeah,
I was like, what the hell? Like, where's season 1? I've never seen this show. And because I was really confused, because I thought I turned on season 1 and I was just like, they make it sound like I should be knowing something here. Like, I'm so confused. And then I looked and I'm like, oh, it's on season 4. Let me switch it to season 1. There was no option to do that. But now, many years later, they finally have season 1, 2, and 3, and 4. And I was just like, yes, now I can finally watch it. So it must have been a weird thing where the rights for the 1 through 3 were on a different platform. And there's so much more competition where there's Disney Plus, there's Netflix, there's Amazon Prime, there's Now TV, there's all sorts of different things that or you have Amazon Prime, but then like they have like the additional subscription to that subscription where they have like what is it,
MGM.
what's MGM, yeah. And like other things, like if you want to watch certain types of content, you have to add to that. So it's like, because initially with Stargate, that was the issue, was that like I was watching on one platform, then all of a sudden that disappeared completely, then that left, and then I found a different platform. Then it acted like it was gonna go, but then it didn't, so I've stayed with it. But then they got it back at the other one anyways, but I'm glad that I didn't have to go back to that subscription. So yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, no, I mean, like this is why DVDs is really somehow, I mean, it's nice.
Yeah.
Even though if you don't have like a ways to play them, but actually when you think about it, this was such a nice way because you had it and then you just had it. And it's kind of like, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's just, I'm curious how that will develop. But I think like overall, the way people consume has kind of stayed so much the same, but it will probably start to evolve now because it's just so difficult to, I mean, it's not the same. There's
Yeah.
a very different quality of it. And I think when you get this oversaturation, usually that's when something starts to kind of, like just peter out a little bit. And who knows what
Yeah.
happens. I mean, I guess we'll see what the next thing is. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting because Stargate, as you said, it's like such a walk through history in that regard,
Yeah.
in terms of like
Yeah.
this sort of outside aspect of it.
Yeah.
But
Totally.
but
But
yeah.
going on to this next episode,
Yes.
I'll let you maybe start with it.
Yeah. The Prodigal, I mean, I have to say, like, I was wondering about Michael, and obviously I knew after the recap that they were going to reintroduce the character. I more thought it was going to be in the finale. Like, I actually thought, because it was like they didn't, I thought they would either reintroduce him in the two-parter or maybe at the finale, but maybe like because there's also this Todd thing going on, maybe that's going to be more at play. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll have to see. Maybe Michael is, I mean, I don't really believe, we don't know what to believe at the end of the episode. It's kind of like, I mean, how many times did Apophis die, right? Like,
True. True.
so I don't always trust everything. But I mean, obviously we have this episode where just overall, Michael comes back, he takes over the base, he kidnaps Teyla and tries to escape, and
With
they
her
end up,
son. Yeah.
exactly, because remember his goal, like he wants her son. I mean, that's why.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the overall kind of crux of it, and Stargate stopped him, but there's of course other, I mean, I guess what is interesting is the episode, which is a very kind of dark episode, starts with such a like a playful opening, because you have first I mean, you have this banter with Woolsey and Ronan, where he's talking with Ronan about the mission reports, and he gives him
Oh.
a paper corner. And then you also have McKay and Shepard like playing with trucks in the like remote control in the
Yeah.
hallway, and like Teyla's like, almost gets tripped, and she's like trying to get the baby to sleep. And so it's kind of like this weird, like, kind of a very Stargate like playful opening, and then darkness. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I liked it though.
yeah, me too. I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. It's classic.
Yeah. I like how like I think that's, just shows like the classic like Stargate
Yeah.
ability to keep things light while it's dark.
Exactly. And to like lull you into like a false sense of security, almost like, oh yeah, that's right. Stargate's humorous, sarcasm, and then like boom, power
Yeah.
outage. But I love it. It's like one of the, I mean, come on, one of like the most like deepest like most powerful episodes, like starts with O'Neill doing a crossword puzzle, right? Like in the Lost
Mm.
City.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like it's classic Stargate.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what did you think overall, like of the?
Overall, I liked it because I've always really liked Michael. And I think it's such a complicated character, um, because of him being that way, basically because of what they've done to him.
True.
And so it's, like we've said before with that character in particular, like it's never just black and white. Like there's a lot of like owning up to things, that I think like the team is never fully done, if that, in my opinion. Like I feel like they've never fully owned up to the fact that they did actually create him.
Yep.
Like they kind of run away from that idea because I think it's almost like they can't handle that thought. um and so and he's just like he's turned into such a, in my opinion, a scary, threatening character, because it's like, he has so much like desire to get revenge almost, and to be able to have all like these master plans of craziness that would destroy everyone but himself and his mission. And so it's like, it's scary, the thought of him going after Teyla's son, and then like, and then having like this delusional way about it, that it's like he's willing to have her go with him, and tries to tell her that like, he'll basically take care of the two of them in a sense. Like
Mhm.
at first he wasn't willing to do that, but then he was, because he was saying how she was like empathetic to him. And so it's really creepy, I think. And so I did really like the episode. I thought it was interesting to kind of have it be that like they take over the base. And I think it portrays his desire to stick with whatever he was planning, like his insanity of it all, like his own team members that were there to help him even
Mhm.
were kind of questioning like staying there because of like safety reasons or whatever. And like they already had the child, like why not just go? Like I think one of his people that are helping him like say that. And so it's just kind of like, I think part of why I really like the episode is it kind of goes into that mental weirdness that Michael is at.
Yes.
It kind of really shows how effed in the head he is,
Yeah.
because of everything he experienced. And then it shows, I feel like Teyla always has this empathetic nature to her towards him still, even though she's protecting and she knows he's far gone in a sense. I feel like she still, I think, almost has that empathetic nature towards him, because I think she understands what was done to him was wrong, or that maybe that's how she feels. And so then taking that, and then you have the different things that are happening where, Shepard and the team are trying to figure out how to get to her. And um of course there's the obstacles that get in the way because of a shield thing being there, and then Ronan just being like wiped out with the rest of the other people, like, and then
Yep.
he eventually comes to and does his typical Ronan thing of
Yeah.
trying to just, punch everything down and get everyone, and then he gets himself knocked out. And
Yeah, I have to say I was really one of the most surprising things the episode, because obviously like I knew that Michael wasn't going to make the base self-destroy or something like that. Like it was going to be okay in the end. Like we have some episodes left.
yeah.
I was really surprised that Ronan ended up injured at the end. That was like my biggest like shock. And that he was
Yeah.
in the hospital and he wasn't, he was, even Woolsey was better off than him in terms of being able to walk around. That was my biggest surprise.
True, because it's like they always make him so superhuman when he fights.
Yeah.
That, he can get blasted away by so many things, and he always seems to like get through that. Like I was expecting initially, like you're right with that being surprising, because I think my initial reaction to him getting falling and like basically getting knocked out was like I thought he was faking it. Like I thought he was like somehow okay and that he was going to get up and save the day kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like I thought he was going to be the one to
Mm.
to get everything to work. I didn't anticipate like Teyla being able to go run hiding off with her baby, and then kind of, and then with like that earpiece she was able to communicate with Michael and try and like, you know, she kind of in a sense kind of led it in a certain direction because of that. And then with Shepard and everyone then, you know, being able to get through and help and stuff. But like, so I didn't fully anticipate some of the steps that occurred in order for everything to kind of like pull together.
Mm-hmm.
um then when it gets to like the final end bit, I don't know if you want me to wait before we talk about like the final scene
Yeah,
kind
no, no,
of.
no, go for it. Go for it.
um
Yeah.
but like it's like, you know, then they have that really badass scene of Shepard fighting with Michael like on that really
Yeah.
high like roof area, and you know, outside, and then like Teyla comes around and basically helps fight him off, and then Michael's hanging from the building and she basically kicks off his hands so that like he falls and apparently has met his doom and died.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a really powerful moment for it to be her that did that,
Mm-hmm.
because I think she's been through so much with her child, and Michael, you know, having this obsession with her child, and initially when she was pregnant, you know, him taking her then too, and like all this stuff that she's very linked personally with it all, that I think it was important that it was her
Totally.
that kicked him
100%.
off the
Yeah.
building.
Yeah,
And
totally. Totally.
you know, would be horrific if you truly think about it, but at the same time, probably satisfying in the sense that she's dealt with so much personally from him to just have him finally wiped out, you know?
Yeah. Well, especially because I mean, like, even having the inkling, you know, that he's, you know, gone or can't contact them or can't, maybe they think he's dead or whatever, like in previous situations, it probably must be very difficult because if you know that he's capable of basically having had kidnapped her in the past and all these things,
Yeah.
I would imagine, you know, it's difficult to just not think about that
Yeah.
and to not worry about that happening again. And it's
Yeah.
probably like one of those like kind of low level things that's just there. And especially knowing how much he wanted her child, that it was like, you know, probably something, you know, something that I would imagine it's not possible to just ignore.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know how I feel about whether or not he's actually dead. I guess the best way I would know is at the finale episode, which
Yeah.
I haven't seen. And I honestly, like, I know I've watched this season, but I truly cannot remember whether
Yeah.
he comes back or not. But I mean, if this is his like ending, do you think that would be like, would you be like, okay, that's it's good for ending the Michael chapter?
Yeah. I mean, I think it'll be a bit ridiculous if they bring him back. Like, I think like I know like there's been so many times with different characters that like you think they're dead and they're not, but I kind of personally get kind of sick of it being things where it's just like so ridiculous and you're just like, okay, well clearly he fell off of like a massive height. Like you would imagine he's a goner. Like so hopefully he's a goner. Like I think that's kind of a good place to stop it. I think it's an odd place in the sense that, like you said, it wasn't like a final episode. It
Yeah, I
was
mean,
like close to the end, but not. So it does make me question, is something going to happen where somehow he's back?
yeah,
Um, but I think I'd be happy with that being like the end of it, like with his character. I think it
yeah,
makes sense. And maybe there's something bigger and the, or whatever, like you says with Todd or something that's going to happen. Um, you know, kind of to me, it felt like it made sense to have that big final moment of Michael trying to do what he's trying to do, and then he doesn't get away with it, kind of thing.
yeah.
Um, So
I mean,
yeah.
I guess that makes sense because if you think like the climax of like Michael's involvement was him kidnapping Teyla when she was pregnant, right?
Yeah.
Like to me, when I think about like the absolute peak of Michael being a problem,
Yeah.
that was kind of his most problematic. And I mean, maybe if they, it would be difficult to try and ramp that up again
Yeah.
because of, I guess, the character motivations. But I mean, I think this is where, yeah, if there was like two more seasons, then I would probably say, oh, maybe Michael comes back. But
Yeah.
I would agree it would feel a bit rushed and also strange if he came back so quickly at the end. Again, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they would be able to integrate it in a way if they do that. But I mean, with the
Yeah.
Goa'uld, it was super easy because they had the sarcophagus. And so they could just say,
Yeah.
I mean, all the time the mothership, it's blowing up, and then you look and you see like a little, like something going off, and oh well, one person managed to escape, and you pretty much know it's the Goa'uld.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. And I mean, I think too, like, if they were planning on keeping Michael there for the rest of season 5, like, then they should have had it be that he escapes with her baby. And then it's about them trying to
Yes,
get him with the baby kind of
exactly.
thing. So I have a feeling that was the end of it, but I don't know because I don't remember. Um, but I'm also curious because I have heard that the end season 5 being the last season, I'm not sure if I remember this correctly, that it wasn't actually expected for that to be the last season.
Hmm.
And so I think I remember reading something where people were saying like it felt like unfinished and that
Hmm.
it didn't really wrap up certain things because I think they were expecting to have a 6th season.
I think,
Um,
yeah, I think this is true. Like, not only I think were they planning on having a sixth season, but I think then when they couldn't have a sixth season, they were planning on having a movie. And I
oh
mean,
yeah,
I
yeah.
remember this because this is like the year I actually moved to Canada, and it was like the one time when like Canadian dollars were worth more than US, like for the short
Mm-hmm.
period of time. And so it was actually really difficult, the exchange rates.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember that it being an issue that because the Canadian dollar at this time was so high, that it was actually very complicated to produce the video for
Oh,
the
okay.
movie. And so that was one of the contributing factors of why they could never make the movie. And I'm not sure if this also contributed at all to Universe having problems, but I know that there was some exchange rate issues. Like I remember reading that, and this is at the time I moved there, that the like, I mean, it was basically flipped of what it is, that the
Mm,
Canadian dollar was worth probably like, I don't know, 1.2 something US or something. It was
mm-hmm.
really brutal in that sense. So for,
Wow.
I would imagine for production companies where they are like maybe financing it with US dollars and suddenly it's going, 20% less. Maybe
Yeah.
that's, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
all the complete details. I mean, maybe if somebody's watching and they have like more info, but I remember that being like a kind of a, that it
Yeah.
wasn't that people didn't want the movie. It was
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Because I think for a while, wasn't that, I think I remember during the time of that, I think I was like talking to you saying I was like excited about the movie and like we were all excited about there being a movie and um like I think like it kept getting put off, I think is what was happening. Like
Mm-hmm.
initially they kept thinking they were going to do the movie. And then I think for a few years it kept getting put off, right? And then eventually they just said it wasn't happening.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I mean, I think it took until 2013, 2014, then somehow the rates flopped again. And
Ah, okay.
but I think at that point it was already like nixed,
Yeah. Yeah.
unfortunately. So, but I would have loved to see an Atlantis movie, like actually. I mean, that would be cool. Or even like
Yeah.
a full, I mean, obviously a full sixth season would have been the best. Like
Yeah.
because I mean, I'm interested to see now what is the kind of final thing that happens. I mean, I have to say, like, I for some reason I had a like I was like, oh, it will be Michael. But with the last couple of episodes, I feel more like it's gonna be Todd.
Yeah.
And I
Same.
don't know if you got that feeling, especially with like, even the two or three leading up to like the last two or three we've kind of watched. I feel like it's pushed more in the direction of Todd causing more of a problem because he suddenly has different power and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely every time they started to bring Todd into the picture, I definitely feel like it's steering that way. So I'll be very surprised if it's not.
Yeah, totally. Or
So,
at least
yeah.
like some major, like, I mean, now that I think about it, it makes the most sense. It's some kind of like major Wraith situation that,
Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, I guess like it's interesting because Michael, in a way, he was never accepted by the Wraith or the humans.
Yeah.
And so if his end is in like a, episode 14, that's not even in a two-parter, and not at like the beginning of the end of the season, is kind of oddly fitting for his character if that's when he is ending, like
Yeah.
it's like when you think about the character arc, it's like perfect because he, like, I mean, it's very sad, it's very tragic, but it's like kind of perfect. He was never accepted by the humans, he was never accepted by the Wraith, he doesn't even get like a proper send off. It's kind of anticlimactic in a way.
Yeah.
Not like the episode was anticlimactic, but when you think about his demise, is kind of anticlimactic if that's his demise in a way. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. But I just like, one thing to bring it back for 2 seconds to the recap is I think the recap did help me remember how Michael was when Michael was made to be human.
mm-hmm.
Um, because I had forgotten, because I remember way back when I saw that at first episode where they introduce his character, it's like I found like I really liked that character, and you kind of grow attached to that character, you have empathy for that character, and then to see such the shift from that to what he became once he took over Atlantis is like so massive. It's
Oh yeah.
like so massive that I think if anything the recap did help remember as a viewer, like, gosh, what Michael's truly been through, like even though he's a villain, like what he's actually truly been through, from being where like he's kind of this clueless human to realizing he's actually a wraith, to then, all these things that
Yeah.
were done to him, like, um and so yeah, I think it was actually kind of nice, I guess, in a sense, to see that and remember that before seeing the
That's true.
episode.
That's absolutely true. I wonder if we like both went back right now and just rewatched like the the recap, knowing that it was kind of a recap leading into Prodigal, if we would feel differently about it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, because
Yeah.
there's the feeling of, oh, dang, recap. But on the other hand, like once you know what's coming, maybe you have a different appreciation or feeling about it.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I mean, is there anything else about this episode that we didn't mention that you wanted to mention, or have we kind of pretty much covered it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think so. I mean, I have like the more we talk about it, the more like everything kind of oddly makes a lot of perfect sense in a weird way that Michael is actually out of the picture. So I
Yeah.
think that's interesting because I honestly, like, when I watch it, I wasn't really sure. I was like, oh, well, yeah, but they've done this before. But then when I actually realistically think about the timeline, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe this is it. So I'm actually really interested to see what happens for the rest of the season,
Yeah.
and what is the baddie at the end.
Yes. So no spoilers, people. No
Yeah.
spoilers.
Yeah. But I mean, overall, like, I mean, what are your thoughts about Michael? Like, imagining his like arc is kind of concluded. Did your thoughts about him like change? I mean, you brought a little bit of it up right now when you were talking about the recap, but do you think like your feelings about Michael have changed over the course, or have you kind of really?
Yes. Yeah. So I think initially when you're first introduced to that character, and I also think the intention behind it is for the viewer to kind of like him and feel empathy for him, and it's like feeling kind of torn when you realize, like, you know humans, Atlantis team, all of that are basically trying to make him into what they perceive as something that's not a risk, that's better for them. They think they're doing the right thing, but yet they're also torturing someone, and trying to create them into what they see. So I think I kind of went through a lot of like back and forth, and because it's like I really like that character and then felt really bad for him that when he first started to kind of turn and show that element of being kind of more like a villain, I
Hmm.
still empathized with him. I still like there was something about his character that I wanted to see maybe somehow turn it around and work with the team instead of going against them. And I kept thinking, well, maybe something will happen that they can work together. And I kept hoping for that. But then it was just like got worse and worse.
Oh
And
yeah.
then he becomes more and more scary. He looks more and more scary. He seems more out of his mind each time you see him. So I think that naturally makes me then obviously the character's awesome, but as what I'm wanting to happen changes, then I think, oh my gosh, he's bad, they need to stop him.
Yeah.
Like he's not gonna turn around and suddenly become the Michael that you've learned about the first time you're introduced to that character. So then it's like the instant like reaction is just kind of like, oh yeah, you want to stay away, like get
Yeah.
away, get him away, like if he dies, cool, whatever. And so that's how it's kind of changed for me. I do feel like it's also the same with Todd. Like, I feel like I actually really like Todd and I like how Todd's been able to work with Atlantis. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of disappointed me for them to have him kind of shift and change and not trust them and be kind of more scary when he seemed like the friendly Wraith that like
Yeah.
yeah he's a little sketchy but like he's not going to
Yeah.
do anything too bad, like he's different from the rest. And so then like when you start to realize like well maybe he isn't as different from the rest as you thought or as I thought, um then yeah my feelings change about those characters as I'm watching it, I think, as you start to see more of their story. But how about you?
I mean, I think it's really kind of fascinating the way that they have kind of written these characters that you have such a complex relationship with them. And I think
Yeah.
it's probably pretty similar. Like, of course, when you first meet Michael, you're kind of almost put in a place of being on his side. And the whole thing almost makes you feel very uncomfortable, like at the end of the
Yeah.
introduction, because you go, what were they thinking? Like you almost like go, why did they do this?
Yeah.
Like this was so unethical. And I think, I mean, they acknowledged that it was. And I mean, I understand this situation. It's like a very complicated situation that they're in this with the Wraith and everything.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because yeah, you slowly kind of witness this descent of Michael into sort of being like an antagonist from someone that's maybe just someone that they wronged. And I think
Yeah.
that's really interesting when you kind of think of how almost in real life, like a lot of people that kind of become sort of antagonists, you can kind of look at probably they had something that's similar. And so I think in that sense, it's like it's almost like every villain usually has like a backstory like that a lot of times, even in movies, but we almost got to experience that like ourselves. And so
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
that was kind of really cool and interesting, and not just
Yeah.
like flashbacks, like we really experienced it. And so I think that that aspect of it was really interesting. And so I think what you mentioned, I would definitely agree with that it changes, but you almost have to go, okay, yeah, like I guess it'd be basically like any villain you would see, but maybe without seeing that aspect. And they must, a lot of
That's
them
a
have.
good point. Yeah. Yeah.
With Todd, it's difficult because I mean, I always kind of thought of him as like, yeah, a Wraith that they kind of collaborated with, but somehow I always saw him more like Ball.
Oh,
And like,
really?
like in the Ball in the sense of like when things were advantageous, they did collaborate with him. And he could
Mm-hmm.
manage to collaborate with him. And I mean, he made steady comments, but in the end, when they needed to work together, they worked together. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that probably Todd, it's very similar, and I think maybe with a little bit more is like Ball with a little bit more of probably I don't want to say like a moral code, but like a certain code of like honor,
Mm.
because he would
Yeah.
kind of keep his word. So it's like if Ball had like more honor, then this is kind of like how
Yeah.
I imagine like the changing in Todd is probably like to me I almost interpret it as well. I mean, a lot of people when the power shifts and they have to do certain things, then some things become less advantageous to them, like certain
Mm-hmm.
alliances. And so maybe in his situation, like I would look at it not like he's necessarily turning, but that the situation has changed and a thing that
Mm-hmm.
is more advantageous to him has changed or more necessary to him has changed.
Mm. Yeah.
And so I kind of like would look at it more like like that's probably how I kind of view Todd. Because yeah, I mean, I guess like there's this aspect where he collaborated with them, and so maybe there was more of a, that sort of tone. But I almost gathered like, well, now this is, it's all like the Tok'ra, I mean, had a very similar almost relationship that it was like it worked, but then when it didn't work, they were like, mm-mm. And so,
True. Yeah.
and so
I
maybe
never
like,
thought about that. Yeah.
yeah, maybe he's like more like Tok'ra. I don't know. Like maybe Ball is wrong. Maybe it's more like as I think about it. But I mean, I think it just goes to show how differently people can react when their situations are different. And I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's also because I think people will. You can see the same thing in our own world. That like you
Yeah.
maybe question why did that person do that? But like it's not that they change; it's that the situation surrounding them changed, and so the more beneficial thing is to do the other thing. So yeah, those are kind of
Yeah.
thoughts.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It will be interesting, like when I get to a point where then I'm rewatching it again, I'm curious like how I'm gonna feel about certain characters and knowing they're probably, I would assume I would remember their character arc a little bit more than because the last time I watched Atlantis was so long ago. I don't remember anything from it. So it'll be interesting when I eventually do get to a point where I'm rewatching again, that like I'm curious. It probably would be an interesting episode to do to see how we may feel differently, like
Yes,
about
totally.
certain things or view it differently, because we know of things to come. Um,
Oh, totally,
because that
totally.
made so much sense. And as you were saying all of that, certain scenes and memories of things I've seen with Todd flash into my mind. I'm like, oh, yeah, like how come I didn't view it like that, where I'm kind of seeing it as he's doing things that are of necessity and an advantage to him, but then he's not going to do the things that don't work for him. And then once he gets a little bit of power, he's using that for his benefit. So that makes sense. I wasn't fully seeing it like that, but then when you started explaining, now it's making me feel like maybe going back and rewatching, maybe I'll view it slightly differently.
Oh,
Um,
totally. I mean, I would like, I'm sure there's some character introductions. Like the one that always like Mayborn is always like when he's first introduced, like the first time I ever saw him, I like, oh, he was so annoying. But then now that I know his character arc, whenever I go back and rewatch those episodes, I have a totally different feeling. And the same with
yes.
McKay, actually. With
Yeah.
McKay's first episode, because the first time I ever saw that, I was like, oh my God, he's just a, butthole.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then when I rewatch it after seeing Atlantis, it's like you actually see him through the lens of he's just this really insecure scientist that has a thing for Carter. And so he's kind of overcompensating and doesn't know how to act because he's not mature enough
Yeah.
to handle the fact that he likes someone so smart.
Yeah.
Like,
It does bring up like a point where it's interesting when you rewatch shows, because
yes.
it's like initially, when the writers are writing this, I'm assuming that they're not thinking about people rewatching, right? So they're thinking about, well, this is the introduction to this character. This is what we want people to know about them. And then they follow along. So it's like when you rewatch something, you already know that, and then you perceive it differently. So it's almost like a totally different experience. And it's kind of cool, like that you can rewatch the same show. And maybe that's why so many people can rewatch Stargate over and over and over and over
Mm-hmm.
again and never get bored, because it's like I feel like the writing is so good with it, the actors are so great, like everything about it, everyone involved in it is so good that when you go back and rewatch, it never gets boring. Like, because I
No.
am someone that I don't like rewatching stuff.
Oh,
Like,
really?
yeah. So like that's why this is very unique to me. Like,
Interesting. Okay.
because when I was a kid, sure, I would have my favorite movies, my favorite things, and I would rewatch and rewatch and rewatch as a little kid, like movies and stuff. But besides that, I've never been someone that has been into rewatching shows. I find it boring. I figure, well, I already know what's happening. Why would I want to rewatch it, even if it's a show I love? Um, that being said, if many, many, many years go by, maybe there'll be something I'll be like, oh, maybe I'll rewatch it. And there's been a few shows in my life where I've ever rewatched anything as an adult. And that that being Stargate, And then also a show that sadly only lasted one season, and it was from back in 2020, and it's kind of like a Disney kids show, but I really loved it, called Julie and the Phantoms. And I rewatched that like right after I had watched it, and I watched it with my daughter Teyla, and me and her have watched it a few times, and that was another show that I felt like I still loved rewatching, even though I knew what was going to happen. And so, yeah, so that's why I say, like, when it's something that keeps the attention there and keeps, like, even if you know things that are going to happen, I feel like, especially with Stargate in particular, it's so packed with so much information that you almost, like, because of my ability to remember all of that isn't the greatest, it's some of it still feels
Same,
new.
same, same. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, you finished like what, like 15 seasons or something when you combine
Yeah,
everything, and then by the like, what do you remember from the first season?
yeah,
But
yeah.
so what we have done in this episode is that we started by saying recap episodes, maybe not so good. But actually rewatching Stargate is amazing. So maybe actually the recap episodes are really good.
Maybe we've talked ourselves into it.
Exactly. Like maybe this is like somehow the whole point, but it's funny, right? Because
Yeah,
it's this
yeah.
amazing conclusion to come to.
So I guess ultimately, those that are watching this or listening, like, do you like recap episodes? If so, why? Or what you do or don't like about it? And then what do you think of the episode with Michael, that what's it called? The Prodigal. Do you agree with our views on it, or do you have other things to say about it?
Yeah, exactly. And if you do like what recap episodes do you think were really creative in how they did it? Because I
That's a
would give
good one.
Stargate a lot
Yeah.
of credit because they try to make the recap episodes more than something that's just recap. And so
Yes,
they
definitely.
get massive kudos for that.
Yeah.
Massive kudos.